Hey guys, welcome back to That Florida Feeling. I hope you guys had a great week. It's been a good one here in Florida. It's pretty warm. But spring doesn't exist in Florida, so welcome to summer. Although speaking of spring break is here in Florida. They are here. And actually I feel kind of bad because a lot of people are down here as snowbirds, but as spring training for baseball, that's totally not happening right now. I've met a lot of people recently in the past weeks or so that have tickets that are in their gear and all excited, and nothing's happening because these people won't come to a decision. Sorry, minor rant. You probably heard about it in my Jupiter episode too, but there's people. Shoot, spring break. It's season. This is a season in Florida, and it is here. Thank you to everybody who participated in Instagram and Facebook questions. I was actually able to put one up this week. Woohoo! I'm glad we all like to go to the beach or drink in Florida. That's our things. And then I got a lot of cool, personalized answers on Instagram. Go to the zoo. There's a ton of fun zoos in Florida. I totally recommend that one. Day drinking in St. Augustine appeared on both Instagram and Facebook. Definitely a popular thing. So did the beach. Somebody put iDrive in Orlando, which is a really cool answer. iDrive has so much cool stuff, so I think that's a great one. But we all agree that drinking in St. Augustine is fun and going to the beach is one of the best things to do in Florida. And, of course, I must give a shout-out to John, who gave the most Florida answer all the way from Tennessee by saying meth. Yes, sir, Florida. But it's always fun to see what people actually like to do in Florida, since most people think it's theme parks and beaches. And, it pretty much is beaches. So that was pretty cool to see that was an on-point answer. Before I go any further, I want to say thank you so much to Shell3030 on Apple Podcast. She gave me an awesome review, or he, I think it's a she, I don't know. I'm sorry to whoever, but I even had to post it on Instagram. Thank you so much. That review was so nice. It made my day, my week, my month. I really appreciate you going out of your way to take time to actually do a really, really heartfelt review. So thank you so much. Anybody else who's done one that I haven't seen yet, I apologize. Thank you. If you haven't done one yet or have a second, I would really appreciate one. It's Apple Podcast. You can do a 5-star review with a comment, and Spotify, you just hit the 5-star. So thank you so much. Yeah. Booty Fangs. I don't know if I ever actually said a shout out to Booty Fangs. I saw that one today too. If I've already shouted out, thank you again. Love the name. But if I haven't, I'm sorry that's overdue. So did you guys end up liking the episode on Jupiter? I thought it was pretty fun to explore a smaller town in Florida, especially one that's just right there almost at Miami. But it does help you find to do more fun things in Florida, and they're off the beaten path, or the best little restaurants, or celebrity restaurants, or the quietest beaches, just fun things. So if you guys have any other small towns that you've heard about and you want to know more about, please let me know. I always love hearing your suggestions, even if it's not a new place or a thing. I do have a couple other topics that I'm working on. I've got bird watching that was suggested by Paul, so I'm going to do a nature and outdoor one that's still working on. That's a lot. There's a lot to research there, so that's why it hasn't happened yet. Just an update on that one. But today I wanted to do kind of a fun episode, one I've done before, but it's always fun to talk about the sunny side of Florida, but it's also kind of interesting to delve into the not so sunny side of Florida. And especially since Florida has so much history, and you know that not all of it was good. The first place we're actually going to explore is the Dry Tortugas. And the Dry Tortugas is just a boat ride from Key West. And of course, we all know Key West is absolutely haunted, thanks to creepy dolls, pirates, real-life Dr. Frankenstein himself, jilted lovers, hurricanes, and not some other good historical moments. And so it's no surprise that island is haunted, but yet another island so close by is just equally as haunted. Now, if you've heard of the Dry Tortugas, you've probably heard of Fort Jefferson, and that's mainly what they're known for. The Dry Tortugas sits 70 miles west of Key West, and you can actually visit it. It's a national park. You can visit via ferry, private boat, or even a seaplane, which sounds really cool, so one day I'm going to do the seaplane thing just because I can. The area is actually been pretty explored for a long time. It was actually visited by people since Ponce de Leon and his group went sailing around Florida. And of course, he is the same one who gave the name Dry Tortuga, and he did this in 1513. Dry Tortuga is actually the second oldest European name on record in the U.S. And fun fact, Tortuga means turtle, and he gave it that name because of the immense sea turtle community that calls the inlets home. The word dry was actually added later as a way to tell other mariners that there was no fresh water source, which I think is kind of ingenious. Now, the area does have a lot of history, from the shipwreck of the HMS Tiger that had to fight off the Spanish before getting back to Jamaica, to John James Audubon visiting the island and even crafting the iconic Birds of America book from there. Of course, the wreck of the Atocha wasn't too far off the shores in 1622 and found by Mel Fisher again in 1985. And he found the largest cache ever found. Side note, I do talk about the Atocha in my shipwrecked episode. It was a good one. If you want to go back and listen to the Atocha, it's got some good history in that area. And one of the most interesting things about the dry Tortuga that you hear about often, or at least recently, is the wet feet, dry feet policy. And basically that means that the dry Tortugas made news a lot during the Cuban immigration crisis because the wet foot, dry foot policy is that if you make it to land in the U.S., then you wait a year and you can be immigrated. And that was a really bad description of that policy, but it's along those lines. But that means that the dry Tortugas make the news a lot, or they did. Now, of course, the main thing about the dry Tortugas is Fort Jefferson. I mentioned it. I've also talked about this park in another one of my state park episodes. It's a beautiful park, but of course it's actually made up of a bulky fortress that still stands today, and it was started in 1824. And fun fact, it has never officially been finished. We are coming up on 2024 in a few years, and 200 years later there's still a half-built fort with improvements and changes, but never fully finished. Now, the fort is located on Garden Key within the Dry Tortugas National Park, and the fort was instrumental in defending the area against pirates. It was a super strategic spot in the Caribbean, and they even used the fort during the Civil War and as a quarantine site. So with all that history, that means that some people who visited never actually left. And the site is actually a ghost hotbed, since there are things from executions, murder, diseases, and possible cannibalism that happened on the site. This could be a very good reason for all this activity. Now, the ghost I'm going to talk about from the Dry Tortugas is the most notorious, and you might recognize the name. The name of the ghost is Dr. Samuel Mudd. And if you're like, why do I know that name? That's because Dr. Samuel Mudd came to the island as a prisoner because he was in the conspiracy that was led by John Wilkes Booth to assassinate Lincoln. Now, Mudd was a tobacco farmer and a doctor that just had the unfortunate luck of becoming an acquaintance, or possibly even a friend, to John Wilkes Booth. Mudd's home is the place where Booth went after he shot Lincoln and broke his leg. Mudd actually is the man that fixed his leg and let him get away. He did eventually call the authorities about a day later, and they could tell that he was lying. So he was convicted and sentenced to life in prison. I think he escaped the death penalty by like one vote, it said. So this man was very close to go the way of John Wilkes Booth. But the prison he was sent to was known as Hell. And being in Florida summers and the hot sun and the humidity, I could believe that people would equate it to that. The gate on the prison even had, "Whoso with enter here leaveth all hope behind," from Dante's Inferno written on the gates. And Mudd probably felt like it was hell. He was in prison as the yellow fever swept through, and people were dropping like flies. And fun fact, when people died, they just tossed their corpses into the sea. And unfortunately for Fort Jefferson in that area, one of the first people tossed into the sea was the physician. So basically you have this massive pandemic sweeping through. Sounds kind of familiar, doesn't it? People don't know what to do. People don't know what's going on. People don't know how to stop it. And the one person that they're looking to has now just been tossed into the sea. So Mudd realizes it's not going to get any better if they don't start getting help. So he organizes men and manages to actually get the disease under control with the help of some nurses. And he did so well that he was actually pardoned by Andrew Jackson years later and released. Now, they say that Mudd is the man who still roams the fort, and he's not happy to be there. He is known to shove people aside, chase them, and even chase them all the way out of the park. He is far from a friendly ghost, and if you imagine, if you saw a black shadow rushing towards you, do you think you would stand up to him or tell him no? No, you'd probably scream and run away like the rest of us. Although, fun fact, guys, as I say a black shadow, my little black cat jumped up here. Must think I'm talking about him. But back to Mr. Mudd. I mean, I can honestly say if a ghost was rushing me, or if I saw someone get shoved out of the way by something that wasn't there, or the feeling of anger, or depression, or just bad vibes, I would leave too. I wouldn't stick around and see what was going to happen, no. But Dr. Samuel Mudd is one of the most well-known ghosts in the fort and the Dry Tortugas. I don't know that I would ever want to encounter him. I do want to go out there, but that's one part of the Dry Tortugas I'd be happy not to see or to encounter and just leave behind. Now, the next ghost picked a really pretty place to haunt. And actually, it's not just one ghost, it's a couple. And this is Camp Helen State Park off of Highway 98 near Panama City Beach. The park is beautiful as it invites you to explore the white sands and walk the trails of the historic grounds. And the park seems beautiful and welcoming, but it is haunted. And like I said, not by one, but by 3 ghosts. The park even gave into its historical background and had a ghost tour for about 7 years before it became too expensive to put them on. But if you still ask the right person, historian, worker, maybe they'll be happy to tell you about these ghosts. Now, the first ghost is known as Rose, and Rose is probably the saddest. She was a young slave girl killed by Indians in 1843. Rose was a passenger on a ship that ran aground during a storm, and they were trying to get help, and the captain went on shore, and they were trying to fix the boat so they could get it back to being seaworthy, and the Indians seemed nice at first, but something caused them to turn. And they turned on the ship's passengers and the captain, and Rose was killed, and she was buried on the beach, and you can still see her walking down the beach on moonlit nights. I guess I can't think of a prettier place to haunt, but that's still sad. Poor Rose. Now, the second ghost is, actually, this one might be more sad than Rose. Oh, these are just, no, the third one's not. You'll see why in a minute. The second ghost is a little boy called Gigi, and the little boy was with his nanny one day when he ventured away from her. And, of course, he walked outside onto his family's home grounds. Estate? Let's go with estate. He walked out on his family's estate, and being a little boy, he saw water, and he wanted to go to it. And so as he ventured away from his nanny, he drowned in Lake Powell. And that's a really sad, because his parents were apparently in Panama City for the day getting supplies when this accident happened. And so they had prepared this little boy's lunch when they realized that they couldn't find him, and they found him in the lake. And of course, that's so sad, and especially that the little boy sticks around. Apparently, you can see this little boy playing on the old pier, and it's been reported by fishermen and tourists alike that you can see a little boy playing on the pier, and then he just disappears. And of course, the first fisherman that saw it was reported to have checked it out but found no one, and he found the caretaker, and they reassured him that it was impossible because no one lived on the property anymore. But he can still be seen to this day, and sometimes he's so clear that people actually describe him to the workers. Oh, poor little boy. Now, the third ghost is not nice at all. The third ghost is said to be Captain Phillips, the same man that Captain Phillips Inlet is named after. Now, the ghost is the scariest of the 3, and apparently also the angriest. He was said to have visited someone staying in the Hicks log home on the property. The man that was staying in this log home was visiting the new owners of the property. The original family that had owned it, where the little boy had died, had sold it, and this person bought it, and he was visiting them. And the ghost apparently appeared beside the bed. He was said to loom large in the darkness, and in a horrific voice, scream, "This is my house, get out of my house." I don't know about y'all, but I would have left right then. I would yeah, this is your house, I'm out. But Captain Phillips is said to stick around and tend to visit people who stay in the lodge. He was known to dislike people in his life, and now he apparently hates them even more in his death. And he does still visit people in the lodge. He yells mean things. There's apparently, they said, an angry energy in the house, which I could believe that, especially if he's angry in death. He tends to tell people to kill him, whoever him is, and turns families against each other. This is probably not one place I will ever stay. No, Captain Phillips can have his log home. Now, the next story is from another beautiful coast in Florida. It's from the Treasure Coast, and it comes to us from Fellsmere. The old Fellsmere School was built in 1916, and it was haunted by a little boy named Billy. Okay, side note, guys, I think children goes to the saddest. I don't know why. I just do. I don't know if it's because they're stuck there or because they didn't get the chance. I don't know. I just think that children goes to the saddest. But this little boy named Billy is said to haunt the old Fellsmere School. And the ghost is said to be really active. Now, the school did not remain a school. It's actually now the city offices for Fellsmere. And the janitor has reported seeing a little boy in old-timey clothes sitting on the steps as they go about their duties. Office workers and the janitor report things moved around all the time and people feeling things being thrown at them and things being grabbed from them. And it just sounds like the little boy wants to play. They also say that the basement is very active as they can hear someone coming down the stairs and the doorknobs rattling. So when they get up and open the door, there's no one on the other side of the door and there's no one else in the hallway. Probably the saddest, though, is they actually have a recording of the little boy talking after they had suspicions of him hanging around. They had asked him, "Billy, are you here?" And he responded, "Yes." I don't know. I think that's so sad. I would like to go say hi to Billy. The next ghost, though, is going to be a little bit further than Fellsmere. It's still on the Treasure Coast. And these people took up residence and never left the town of Fort Pierce. And the P.P. Cobb building in Fort Pierce is actually the city's oldest structure, and it's said to be haunted. You can actually still visit it today. In fact, it's right almost across from the parking garage, and there's a couple little businesses inside of it. It was actually the state's first trading post, or that area's trading post, in 1882. And then it became a general store in 1896, and it was bought by Peter Cobb. Fun fact, it still says the P.P. Cobb building on the side of it. I know because I've seen this building in person. The building is, like I said, several different businesses now, including my favorite coffee shop in the area, Old Florida Coffee Company. They actually have the largest part of the building. You can go sit on the front steps of this old-timey general store and drink your coffee. And fun fact, I did not know about this when I loved this coffee shop. I used to go when we lived there. And I didn't realize that this building had any real historic importance. Like, I didn't know it was the oldest structure. I did not know it was supposed to be haunted. I just know that there's a fun, really cool coffee shop that's there now. But the building is said to be active. They aren't sure if it's one ghost or many, but there's plenty of reports of people hearing their name being called, being touched, or generally an odd feeling. The feeling, though, isn't malicious, but it does unnerve some people. I guess it's the feeling of being watched when you know no one's there. Now, I do love this coffee shop, and I can tell you as someone who's lived in haunted places, especially St. Augustine, that this is not one that I would be too worried about. Actually, it's got a really cool vibe. The people there were really nice, and I don't know. I would definitely be willing to go back to this one. But side note, if you don't have a reason to be in Fort Pierce, you probably don't want to be in Fort Pierce. That's a podcast for another day, though. Now, the last place I'm going to talk about is the Stranahan House in Fort Lauderdale. And the Stranahan House is the oldest house in Fort Lauderdale, and it's also the most haunted. Seems like oldest and most haunted just tend to go hand in hand. Now, this house is open for tours, but visitors are usually warned, don't be surprised if Frank Stranahan, the original owner, photobombs their selfies. I think that's pretty cool. Ghost just wants to be seen. Now, the house's original residents are still watching over and taking care of the house. Guests regularly see Frank in their pictures, but Frank isn't the only one who likes to appear. Ivy, Frank's wife, has been known to guide people up the stairs with her hand on their shoulder, and they note that it's her due to her perfume lingering in the air. Probably the weirder of the hauntings is that you can sometimes hear a baby cry in the house, and then you see a woman carrying this child through the house when they know that there's no baby or woman dressed in old clothes in the house. They also know that Augustus Stranahan likes to stay upstairs and is known for being grumpy. In fact, he's even been known to toss books around in the upstairs part of the house. So if you ever go to this house and you hear something coming from above, you could probably just tell it's cranky old grandpa. But the Stranahan house is beautiful, and you can tour it if you're interested in seeing one of the oldest and most haunted houses in Fort Lauderdale. As you guys know, Florida has many haunted stories, and these are just a few that dot the Sunshine State. I wanted to do a simple yet kind of interesting episode this week. I know that sometimes the 45-minute and hour-long episodes can be a little bit much, so I thought this would be a fun one, especially since, paranormal can be very interesting. It's another way to learn history. But you do have to watch out for a lot in Florida. Ghosts, alligators, right now a lot of tourists. But you should always be on the lookout for Florida Man. And today's Florida Man comes to us from July of 2019. And I had to read this headline a couple times to make sure that I actually read it right. Florida man arrested after pelting girlfriend with McDonald's sweet and sour packets. Okay. Numerous packets, by the way. And do you know why he felt the need to pelt his girlfriend with sweet and sour packets? Because she bought the wrong McDonald's food. All right. And the fight got worse when he pinned her down. But she wasn't going down without a fight. No. She proceeded to rip part of his beard off. I mean, I say go, girl. The man was actually arrested and charged with battery, all because he didn't get the right McDonald's food. I would say he was hangry and just needed a Snickers bar, but nope, I am fairly certain this guy was just an asshole. So remember, guys, if you're hungry and you want food that bad, maybe go get it yourself. Well, I hope you guys liked hearing about some dark spots on Florida's sunny shores. There's actually way more ghost stories than I was able to fit into one episode, so you know there will be another one. But let me know if you guys want to hear any certain topics. Again, small towns, animals, sports teams. Florida's got it all, so if you decide you want to hear something, just let me know. Like I said, I'm working on a few listener suggestions, so if you haven't heard your suggestion yet, please know it is an upcoming topic. Again, thank you so much, Shell3030, for that review. It was so kind of you. And if you guys have a second, please leave that review on Spotify and Apple. It really does help get the podcast out, and it does help other people to learn about it. I've got some fun things coming up soon. Don't forget to check out Facebook group and page for the polls, for the fun memes, just for Florida things, and place for Florida lovers to connect. Don't forget to use the hashtag #ThatFloridaFeeling on Instagram or Twitter, so I can see and share you guys' awesome pictures or things about Florida. I do hope that you guys have a great week. Have a fun weekend. Wear your sunscreen. Drink lots of water, guys. And as always, that's your daily dose of sunshine.